All right, stand by for a quick intro. Welcome back to another episode of the Strongman Winner Circle podcast. This is episode 62. I'm your host, Nicholas Gamby, and today we have a very special guest of Ondra Fojtů of the Czech Republic. I've had the pleasure of competing with Ondra in his last three competitions of official Strongman Games, Europe's Strongest Man, and in the same group at World's Strongest Man, where he narrowly missed the finals in the stone-off. So let's catch up with this youngster to talk all things Strongman, to go over what he does best, what he thinks about the sport, and where he's headed. So tune in to today's episode with Ondra Fojtů. All right, Ondra, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
How are you feeling about 6-7 weeks after Worlds?
Yeah, I'm feeling great. You know, packed a couple of pounds on because the training hasn't been as intense as for Worlds and the comps before that. But yeah, the rehab of my knees going great and everything overall is feel good. How about you? Your bicep and everything good?
Yeah, I'm just recovering, just living life, but it's nice to kind of focus on different projects and just kind of be a little away. But I am kind of missing it. I've only had I did one workout probably in the last 5 weeks, and that was probably a little premature. So but this podcast is not about me. How so when you say packed a few pounds on, is that 10 pounds, 10 kilos?
That's since Worlds it's about 7 kilos. So
nice.
Yeah, just always at the beginning of summer, you know, when it gets hotter and everything, I tend to drink more. I tend to, have a ice cream once or twice a day. So yeah, it's all happens,
I love it. Of course, you gotta enjoy it. But let's start, since we were talking before the show. This is probably your first English speaking podcast. Is that correct?
Right. Yep.
Well,
that's correct.
I'm honored to have you on. So yeah, let's talk about how you got into the sport of strongman and what initially kind of introduced you to this great sport that we all do for fun and pain.
Yeah, I'll start from the beginning of my athletic career. I started playing handball when I was in kindergarten, so around 5-6 years old, and I played for nearly exactly.
Found it.
And I played handball for almost, I would say, 12 years. I got nominated into national team as well, but nearly missed out on that. And then when I turned 16, I started working out to try to get better at the sport and everything. However, I found out I was quite strong from the beginning, because when I started working out, I was nearly 100 kilos, so 220 pounds. But I've always been a bigger kid. And then after about a year training, I tried my first strongman comp. It was like a totally beginner comp. It was at a parking lot of a restaurant, and it was we had like 100-kilo log and 100-kilo farmers and stuff like that. And I was second to last at that competition. However, thanks to that, I got hooked to the sport, finished with handball, and started focusing on strongman.
So you're about what, 18, 17 at this point?
No, I'm 16, 17.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Well,
which was quite interesting, because parents had to come with me to comps, so they would sign the waivers that they take full responsibility if something happens to me, because I wasn't 18 yet. And yeah, so I started at the beginner comps. I had 3 or 4 beginner comps before I moved on to the amateur scene, the amateur Czech scene, which, strongman isn't really popular here. It's a really small, closed circle of competitors, and everybody knows everybody, but it's nice. And when I started on the amateur scene, I was above average, because, I was about 130 kilos when I in my first amateur comp, and I think I finished 5th out of 20 athletes, so that was quite nice. And then we have the Czech Strongest Man. We have the amateur and pro one. And on my first amateur Czech Strongest Man, I won the competition. And I would say at that point, the gears sort of switched, and I thought like maybe I could achieve something in the sport. Then began, it's not like in the international scene when there are competitions all year round because it's indoors, but all the comps here are outdoor. So you have sort of like a season and off season that starts maybe in May, at like the end of May, and ends in sort of end of September. That when the weather, you're able to compete outside without freezing yourself. So when the off season began from my amateur to sort of like the pro scene in the Czech Republic, I gained the most amount of mass as well as strength. I was about like almost 170 kilos, which I looked like a ball. It wasn't fun. It wasn't healthy at all. I would get out of breath walking 5 steps, but I managed to sort of break the gap between the amateur and pro national scene. And I wasn't really lost on the pro scene. I was always in the top three on every comp. And that's sort of when I found out that my pressing power started to increase, because on my first max log comp I pressed 170 while I was still, how old was I? Maybe 19, 20 years old, something like that. And then the year after that, when I turned 21, I pressed the junior world record at the 206. And that's when I first tried to go to an international comp, which was OSG Europe's, which was, in my mind, a huge step. I was just going there to sort of, scout the field, see how I would do, and I managed to take third place, which was unbelievable. I wasn't really expecting it, but it felt great. And that was the point when, sort of I thought, well, maybe even the international scene won't be so hard after all. After that, I got the invite to Glasgow, to the Log Champs, which was my first Giants Live. That was in September last year, I think, sort of around that time, maybe a bit later. And I took 7th place, 8th place. I'm not really sure, one of those two. And at that point, I was sort of thinking about doing OSG Worlds, because thanks to my position at OSG Europe's, I got an automatic invite, so I didn't have to do any qualifiers. And, most people encourage me to do it, as the Giants Live people, sort of scout their athletes there. So I went there, finished 4th, which was my first sort of it was my first competition when I was so close to a podium, but it didn't happen, unfortunately. But thanks to that, I got invited to Europe's, which had the same outcome. Again, before Atlas Stones, I was in 2nd place, but just got shy of the podium after Atlas Stones, which I finished 4th. And then we had Worlds.
All right, excellent. So, of course, appreciate kind of going over all those items. One thing I like to kind of point out, so of course, starting around like 16, 17, I'm not sure if you caught the show with Wes, but Wes also kind of started at an early age. I think he knew about Strongman and then started actually around 16, and then started competing around 17 and 18 years old. And then there's a lot of similarities, like Kearney started at teenage, Adam Dirk started when he was a teenager, Kordiaka and Novikov started as a teenager. So you saw like a lot of guys. I didn't quite start in my teens, but I did start probably when I was 22. So it's still relatively young. So I'm not saying that starting a teenager is a must in strongman in order to become or get to world's strongest man or get to a high level, but there's a big correlation, and it does kind of help out. But a lot of times those different athletes came from, of course, you came in from handball. Myself, I came from wrestling, and there's, of course, a lot of different like parallels. So I always found that pretty interesting. I know we've talked about it, but that was quite the weight gain going from 100 kilos to 170, kind of a short period of time. But what was was it one of those things where you would gain a couple pounds a week, or was just did you have plateaus? And but what that weight gain look like?
Well, I always tried to gain weight as cleanly as possible, without going to the junk food sort of way or and you like drinking your calories and stuff like that. So I remember when I was around the 110 kilo area, I would eat. It would take me like an hour, hour and a half to eat dinner, to eat lunch, stuff like that, which I would just fill up the plate. I weighed everything just to know, and it would like really take me an hour of just sitting on top of the at the table and just eating, until you really felt sick of the food, and then waiting a bit and eating again. But it wasn't really. It was. I was. Well, it was. I would say the hardest part of the journey, the eating part, eating your way to the open strongman, which I know you probably know.
Oh, absolutely. I think I took some tips. I think once I'm back in training, I want to get back onto the shakes. I think that would be a big helpful. I had one friend here in the Massachusetts area that the minute that he went on a sleep app machine, he gained 60 pounds within a year. So I think that probably might have some effect. I think I have a follow up in a couple of weeks to kind of course, talk about that, because I'm getting to a point where I'm getting pretty heavy. I'm still relatively around like 130 kilos. So I haven't lost too much weight, but I probably lost muscle and gained a lot of fat, but I think that's expected. Right. But it's always interesting in terms of kind of what it takes to, of course, put on the weight. And then when you get to that point, what's going to be the optimal weight? I think of course I would like to get over 300, but I don't think that's going to be possible. But do you think you would ever see yourself being back over 170, potentially get up to 180, or you think there's?
I don't think so. Like it felt great for all the like static strength and everything, but being like a complex strongman, you have to have your cardio up and be able to move fast. So like I don't think I'll ever go that high again. Sitting around the 157, 160 kilos is, I feel, ideal for me right now. But we'll see how it feels, in a year or two. So.
Absolutely. So within that rise, so of course, I saw on there you had a couple of podiums at Czech's Strongest Man, or the Czech Republic Strongest Man. Of course, we're talking about that road from going from OSG Europes to OSG into regular Europes into Worlds. But what's been your kind of biggest struggle as a strongman athlete so far? Like what are the biggest challenges that you faced?
I don't know, to be fair. I'm not really sure, because, it's been a smooth ride till now, have to, knock on wood, with just a couple of minor injuries. But, didn't really have any struggles, to be honest. Luckily, but don't want to jinx it.
All right. Well, let's knock on wood. So you were the first Czech to compete at Worlds since the 2000s. Is that right?
Yeah.
It was like over 15, 16 years.
Yeah. The last time was, I think, 1998.
Oh, 1998. So yeah. even longer. So yeah, 26 years. So how was that received back at home once you got back?
A bit disappointing, to be honest.
All right.
Because I was expecting a bit of a hype, or a bit of not fame, because it's still a small sport, but a bit of a recognition in the sport. But I didn't really get that, so I'm a bit disappointed in that part. But that's what my dad always told me, that he thinks I'll be more famous everywhere in the world rather than back home, and I don't really mind that. So
I would say I feel like I've seen similar parallels, but I think once you maybe get back to your gym, when you get back to the gym community, usually there's some kind of gratification there. But yeah, I can understand. I can understand that piece. But maybe just needs to be more educated. But I know right now the World's Strongest Man is slated to be aired in the USA mid-July, so I think starting the 17th. But is there dates when it comes out in the Czech Republic?
It doesn't. It's not aired here.
It's not aired.
No,
so
it's not.
Not even with the push that even with you representing.
No,
because
I know the only European country that really has it is the UK.
Okay.
And the channel that they have is not aired here, and there isn't really any initiative from the Czech sport, part of to get it here.
Oh, interesting. Well, all right. So maybe you have a little of a mission
Yeah.
to kind of grow in the Czech Republic. But that was similar on the Italy front. I think they are going to air it this year because I think there's a Sky affiliate, which is the Sky Italia, which is of course what they air in Italy. So that's the main channel. But I think of course Sky is a popular channel in Europe. Is that right? Or in the UK?
Yeah, we don't have it.
You don't have it. All right, got it.
No.
All right. So it's coming along. So let's get into a little bit more of kind of World's Strongest Man. It definitely kind of spun me for a loop when I was getting there. Pretty eye opening, especially kind of the preparation going into there. If we had like maybe let's just say we didn't have Europe's and we had like a regular 12-week prep going into it, I think I still wouldn't prepare correctly, just because once we got out there, taking into account of like the timing, the actual heat, the actual implements, I thought overall I got a bunch of takeaways in order to come back and be better in the future. But what were your major takeaways from being a World's Strongest Man, and what do you notice that was maybe something new to you being the first time there, and how could you prepare in the future better? So you have like 2 or 3 takeaways?
To be fair, like for me, I don't think that I would have done anything differently. Like even with Europe's being 3 weeks before that, the events at Europe's were still the events in the heats, almost identical. So I think it just helped me with Europe's having it 3 weeks before that, because it built up sort of a confidence, knowing what were my strengths, what were my weaknesses, compared to some of the guys that were at Europe's, but also at Worlds. And then just having the 2.5, 3 weeks before Worlds where, you just tapered down a bit, got the body recovered. And then on the day at Worlds, I felt great. I don't really mind the format of competing throughout the whole day, having like 2 or 3 hours between each event, because it's the same way at OSG. And it really suits me, in my opinion.
So you like the longer breaks compared to something
Yeah.
like Giants Live in Europe's where we were doing an event every half an hour?
Yeah, I prefer that. Yeah.
Yeah, because it got a little hectic, especially we'll kind of flashback to Europe's. If you get pulled for an interview or you go see the medical tent, then that takes away 10 minutes. That takes away a lot of preparation going into the next event, especially if you're going to be in a different order in the next event. So,
but to be fair, the Giants Live crew always has it, like they're on point. Like I've having been to 2 Giants Live comps, I'd never felt rushed. I always feel that there was enough time. Everybody, reminds you of the time, and so I don't really mind that as well.
Mm-hmm. I think my one regret is that going into the Viking press, I actually thought 13 was the mark to beat. So when I got 13 and tied for Ivars, I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. I tied for first. And then little did I know that you hit 16 reps. So I'm like, it's like I left maybe some reps on the table. And then especially kind of looking back at it, just watching you. And one thing I always say in my press seminars, know the rules. Originally kind of going into thought we could drop the Vikings like we were at Worlds, but we couldn't do it at Giants. So it just kind of played a different kind of strategy. But going back to Worlds, I know, of course, you were kind of slated. You were in a good position to get the finals. Of course, kind of missing now. Of course, you had a great, tough matchup with Smash Ondra. You, of course, a great stone loader. But how did it kind of feel just to kind of be in that positioning, just to get I would say just to the stone off, because even then I feel like all eyes were on you.
When the groups got announced and I saw that I was in the same group with Mitch, that was the only thing I didn't want, being in the same group as either Tom, Mitch, or Evan, as they were, in my opinion, favorites, as well as Matt, Rag. But once I found out that Mitch was in my group, I knew it was always going to be the battle for second place. And I always knew that I was going to have to do the stone off. And once I got to the stone off, there was almost slim to none chance of beating any of the other guys that were in my group. When I got Austin, I knew he was a great stone loader. If I would have got Gav, he's a great stone loader as well. Spencer Emmix is good. You're good as well. So
I would have had a broken wing. So
yeah, but if you were all healthy in that, I still think you'd be able to beat me. So Yeah, it was kind of sort of a bittersweet moment because I got so far, but not that far. But I really enjoyed it, and looking back, it was a great experience.
Statistically, guys that finish third in their group usually come back the next year, so it's definitely a
Yeah,
positive correlation right there. No,
hopefully.
but you were talking about kind of competing with Mitch, competing with Tom. So how did it feel just to be around those guys? Like for me, I felt it was a little different. Of course, Mitch is just such a great athlete, so I wasn't as intimidated. But I feel like if I was standing next to Tom going out there competing, I feel just this not the someone's the size, but just the presence that someone like Tom has. Like and one thing, this is a kind of a funny observation. Just from the times I've met Tom, I feel like for how big he is, he's very sneaky. I feel like
Yeah.
he snuck up on me a few times in the past where he said he comes behind you, he goes, "Hello guys," and you turn around, I'm like in his belly, giving him a hug because I'm like that much shorter than him. But just for you, like how did it feel? Like, of course, I know I've been in the sport for about 12 years, but how did it feel competing with being that group of the 30 best guys in the world?
It's still something I haven't really coped with because it was like a dream come true because I always looked up to these guys, watching their YouTube videos and being like watching their comps and trying to compare it with my results and stuff like that. But once you like compete with them, and once I tied with Mitch on the Webster Stones, and when I beat him at the Viking Press, in my mind it's like, oh, these guys aren't really invincible, they're beatable, and on a good day. But it feels great competing with these guys. And as you said, standing next to Tom is sort of really, you feel like a small guy because me still being 6'2" and over 350 pounds, I feel small standing next to him. And it's something for your manhood. It crushes your soul feeling small.
It
But yeah, it's amazing.
But I feel like we at least got it out of the way. I feel like going forward, I don't think we're gonna. I feel like going forward, I'll have a different attitude. But just like the first time is just a little eye opening, right? Because
Yeah.
you've always watched these guys on the big screen, but now when you're standing next to them, getting out there and going head to head is just a little much. But everybody's gonna be a little different. Yeah, again, it was a lot of fun being in that group too. And I think there's going to be a lot more battles going forward. But I want to talk a little bit about, of course, when I bring kind of athletes on the show, kind of talk about what they do best. So you, of course, there's no surprise that, of course, you're a great overhead presser. Of course, did great on the press medley at OSG. Have a great log. You did 1-2 Viking presses when you talk about the groups in Europe's. But what do you attribute your overhead strength to? Is there anything particular that you attribute it to?
I have no idea. It's something that just came natural to me because everybody enjoys pressing. It's sort of like the reward training session, press
All right.
session. And just like when I started getting like stronger in strongman, we had one of my training partners, Lukas Peps. He held the record before me, the under 23 record, and we always pushed each other on the press. So having somebody that pushed me so much was a great perk of improving my press. And I would say that's like the main thing because once you're training in the same gym, you're about the same age, and you're pressing similar stuff. You get really motivated adding that 2-3 kilos on your max, and that's what I would say pushed me the most at getting my press up. And then I have quite short arms, so that's quite good for pressing. And
All right. I say
yeah,
the same thing. I have shorter arms too.
yeah, just always enjoyed it, so.
All right. Yeah, I think that's kind of half the battle is that you do good. You do good at things that you enjoy. I despise max distances when it comes to front carries. So
Yeah.
like a sandbag or a Husafelt, that's not gonna be a favorite. Throwing's obviously not a favorite, so it's hard to have a passion. But I guess we both have a passion for overhead pressing, so that's why we, of course, kind of take to it very much. So what was the junior log press record before you broke it?
200 kilos.
All right. So you broke it by 6 kilos, which is almost 14 pounds or so. I would
Something like that. Yep.
give or take a pound. But of course, that's very impressive. Now, you also have, of course, a great grip when it came to like the nickel stones. Again, winning the event at Europe's, winning the group event at Worlds. Now, any tips or pointers that you saw that when it came to the kind of those Denny Stone carries that you would like to share?
Well, it's not really, in my opinion, about the grip because everybody hooks grip. When I first started training for them, I was unable to hook 50 kilos on the rings just because it was so painful and everything. But in my opinion, it's not really about the grip because once you lock in your hook grip, it's just about the pain. So you just have to think about something else and not your thumbs falling off. But with these stones, it's really important to, try to lean to one side, which I've done in both of the events. And just I took the heavier stone and stuck it to my leg and walked with it, while the lighter stone just sort of was in the air, and I tried to not touch it with my leg at all. And that's, I think, what it helped me keep my balance, and I didn't really lose it like most of the other guys and had to drop it. The Looking at back at it and talking a bit with Eddie Williams, who holds the record for them, he told me that training for the Webster Stones, the only thing he really trained was picking it up again because he knew he could walk really far with them, but once you drop it, once I dropped it, I was unable to pick it up just because of the my thumbs dying and all the pain, and that's what he told me that he trained the most for, picking it up again. And once you have it locked in again, it's easier to walk another 10 meters with it.
All right, interesting. Of course, there's an interesting tidbit. I noticed that you, of course, had a faster pace than what Brett Nichols, who was actually at Europe's Strongest Man, the holder of the stones, actually mentioned. He mentioned walk very slow with them, and I noticed the guys that did it best, and especially at Worlds, the ones at Worlds, I felt like didn't twist as much, so people were going.
No, they were way easier. The ones at Worlds, way easier.
Yeah, I was just getting. I felt I almost got the same result, but I was a little banged up going into the second time, but just noticing, they didn't turn as much. I almost felt that I would have been better off leading into those preps with almost doing more farmers training, like getting used to like kind of heavier weight, almost overloading the training, and then going back to the hook grip. Just because I didn't think that my hook grip, but I felt like when I was training when my farmers was probably at the best, which was probably like midpoint last year, is when I felt like I was much better at the actual Denny Stone carries, even using plates rather than just the pure rock. And then going to just all training on the nickel stones, I felt like I was focusing too much on the actual hand pain, but not actually on the particular movement. So, and just kind of overloading, because you can, of course, potentially run with 350 in one hand and be almost 150 pounds more than the actual implement. So that would be some good overload training. So I almost like looking back at that. So maybe something that I would kind of change up. But those are all kind of great tidbits. Let's see. So in terms of moving on, so of course I want to plug in Shane Germain as someone that of course I admire as a coach, especially since he's a lightweight athlete coaching all these big heavyweight men. But how long have you been working with Shane?
Well, to clarify a bit, my main coach is Luke Richardson.
Okay.
And Shane is just like sort of like the the godfather watching over and getting the final details and helping me with some stuff as well. But my main coach is
you guys Luke, you guys look so similar that it's confusing. But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'm really like happy with the way things are going with the training, because once I got in contact with them both, the main difference between the training that I've been doing till then is I've never really done like a volume phase. The biggest volume in training I've ever done was maybe like 5 reps, which I thought was exhausting. Which is something they got me on, and I think that helped me a lot. Also, he was the first coach to convince me to do my conditioning, which also helped me quite a bit.
Yeah.
Leading up to OSG Europes, I was doing conditioning twice a week, and I felt like super fit because
So
up until that,
let's break it down. What was the conditioning?
I had 2 different days, which there was always like a warm up. Then could choose between the air bike, rower, or steerage, which I prefer the steerage just because on the rower my hips get pumped quite quickly, and I have too big of a butt for the air bike because the seat is so small. My butt just chews through it, and it's uncomfortable.
So it's been like a little bit over a year with them.
Yep, definitely. I think it's something somewhere around the year now. Yep.
All right, interesting. Yeah, because he just has so many different kind of tidbits. Of course, I've always watched, of course, how his strict pressing for someone that's 90 kilos, or when he was 100 kilos, strict pressing 190. That's of course quite exceptional. And I always like kind of watching even his recent videos. He had a video the other day where he discusses why he uses the zinc tape. For stone loading. I thought, of course, that was pretty interesting. I've not really ever seen that. I think these are the only I see all his athletes using it, but I've never really seen that outside of just Shane himself. But I thought it was pretty interesting because if you're just not going to go bare, that's one thing, but maybe something that I'll adopt just because at some point, depending on the actual weather, being indoors, being outside. I don't know if you watched last year's Worlds. Like I would have probably done the same thing, but when it was Luke versus Gav Bilton, they were going back and forth with, I think it was either 190 or the 200 kilo stone, and they went back and forth, I think in total with all the stones like 10 times, but eventually Gav just like seemed like he sweated too much and all the tacky slips. So I think that's when it'd be a good time to use that tape, but normally for like a series, I probably wouldn't use the tape. So it's interesting in terms of when you should use different precautions, but it's amazing. Just, of course, he worked on so many athletes. So I think he's one of those, I think he had the most athletes at Worlds compared to any other coach.
I think so.
And he was missing Shane Flowers. So it was kind of quite remarkable. But besides kind of like the little tidbits in in some of the volume conditioning, were there some other kind of highlights that you got, even just some working with a coach, where some takeaways that you feel that really helped your strongman game?
In my opinion, when people are trying to find a coach, they really need to find someone they trust 100%. And the first time I met Shane was 2 years ago at the Log Champs in Ipswich, and we just clicked at first words. And when he offered me that, like the main guy that would coach me would be Luke Richardson, I was 100% sure that I would trust him 100%, just because Luke's one of the younger athletes, and just like I've watched him ever since he came from powerlifting to strongman, and I really I really agree with most of the stuff that he says. So yeah, that's great.
All right, excellent. If I always kind of go back and forth because I've only had one coach, and that was probably for like 6 months back in 2019. But for the most of my career, I've gone coachless. So I don't know if I'm coachable at this point. I've talked to guys like Adam Bishop. Adam Bishop has coached himself. Of course, he's had deadlift coaching from Andy Bolton, who's a famous deadlift coach. So I've always had a lot of consultants. Like I had Russian Olympic coaches back in the day for a lot of the overhead stuff, and powerlifting coaches to get into working within the suit. I even work with a bodybuilding coach when I do hypertrophy now, but I've never had a dedicated strongman coach. But Shane would be one of those guys that I would consider. I have like a short list of maybe like 3 or 4 guys. But going forward for you, so looking at like kind of like the future of your kind of schedule, are you lined up to do any more competitions this year?
Yeah, I'm doing a Giants live show in September. I can't I don't know if I can say it just because it hasn't been announced, but yeah, I'm doing a show in September, and that's, I think, will be it for this year. I think just 3 comps is ideal for a year. So
Okay, all right. So, but nothing around the Czech Republic or around the
not
Eastern Europe.
not really, and Czech federation like kind of hates me for it, but there isn't really for me much to gain doing these
Sure.
competitions, just because I won't advance anywhere, and the level that they're at is there's a high risk of getting injured, just because it's still outside. Last comp I visited, they had a tire flip on gravel, which isn't ideal. A tire flip at all is like an event that I despise, that I think should be banned. But having it on gravel is awful. They don't allow suits at all. They don't allow straps on deadlift and
Sure.
stuff like that. They're quite old school with the rules. And when I was competing here, I tried to force some of the new rules a bit. But so once I stopped, it went back to downhill again. So.
Doing tires on gravel is interesting because what if your feet slip on the gravel and then your grip on the tire and then you slip back and the tire falls you? That's a whole thing.
Yeah,
I did tires on wet grass once, which wasn't much better.
Yeah, it's I would compare it. In the world, strongman is a sport, but back home, strongman is just a show. It's for people to watch, and they don't really think of you as an athlete, but more of like it's a circus act.
It's funny because my exposure to Czech strongman has been Yuri Katalchuk. Of course, Yuri is a dear friend. I've competed with him back since 2015, and I see he's one of the few 105 strongman that have gotten endorsements outside of just like the sport. So of course he's on energy drinks and beer bottles and all. Yeah. But still, even with kind of someone like Yuri, it's still kind of not exactly where the sport should be in the country.
He was the first one to start with having different types of divisions, like weight classes, because that's never been here. And once he got good or won some of the shows, that's what he tried to push here, and it's working for him. He was also the second time I ever went to compete at a beginner show was his show. He was also trying to push forward like the beginner scene and the amateurs and stuff like that. But with it's sort of like the Eastern European mentality where people are more jealous than encouraging. So once you start sort of, he started like pushing the sport forward. Rest of the organizers sort of tried to bring their hands back and not, try not to affiliate themselves with him, which I have no idea why, but it's a Czech mentality where people are really more, I don't really know how to say.
I think that's all over it. I think I had an old friend used to talk about the crabs in a bucket. So the crabs, when one crab tries to get out of the bucket, they try to pull the other crab down. So the story is they kind of, again, everybody's jealous and everybody wants to be on the same level. So if of course one person can't achieve and get what they want. So it's a pretty interesting. But I don't think that's just an exclusive Eastern European Czech Republic thing. Yeah. But I guess unfortunate, but again, I'm going to be hopeful because opportunity in strongman is the biggest there's ever been, especially I think among all countries. So I hope that things kind of change in the future. So let's so of course you're competing potentially at Giants Live, but like what will your training look like for the rest of the year? Is there certain things that you want to focus on?
Like right now, I had to sort of fall back from training just because of the knee issue that's been bugging me for the past, let's say, 6 months. But it's been getting a lot better recently. And
are you seeing a PT? Are you doing certain rehab exercises?
I have for the past 6 months, and none of them could like really find out what was wrong with the knee. I even went to like a pediatrician, to a doctor, to get like a different sort of scans, which I wanted to. I wanted to get an MRI of it or like an ultrasound of the knee because I knew it wasn't like a mechanical issue. It was sort of either tendons or stuff like that. And he just sent me to an X-ray, even though I told him that, in my opinion, he won't see anything there. He looked at the X-ray, said that my knee was healthy, and to like leave his office. So yeah, that was great. And then afterwards, I got on some of the Polish formula. if you could call it that.
Sure.
And it's been helping my knee, and but it's been getting better. So.
All right, excellent. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is it's really hard to be strong when you're hurt. So of course, taking care of the body is most important. Now, looking at just in general, so of course you've been competing, of course, roughly about 5 years now. But when the sport's kind of all said and done, what are you looking to accomplish?
I don't know. I don't think I've really looked that far into the future yet. Just being, I got my diploma on Monday, and I finished school, and thank you. And I'm applying for jobs now, and I don't think I can look further than like 3 months ahead, just because life's still moving pretty fast, and I have no idea yet. Maybe if you'd ask me in a year, I would be able to answer that. Maybe I won't be able to answer it in 5 years. We'll just have to see how it goes.
All right.
Like my dream would be to open up a gym here, so I would have like a backup plan once I finish Strongman. But we'll just have to see how it goes.
Mm-hmm. You know what Arnold Schwarzenegger thinks about backup plans?
Yeah,
it's the shit. Plan A. It's always plan A where you're looking to achieve, because any energy in plan B just takes away from the main goal. But of course, it's good. You always kind of do have to look at the presence. But like, for instance, like, is there any? Or imagine you probably have some ambition to maybe hit a 220 log, maybe challenge IMBB out there in a few years.
Definitely, that's definitely like one of the plans, to try to move the log. Right now, the plan is to try to move the junior world record as close to the open record as I can, because I still have like almost 2 years being a junior.
If I remember right, your birthday is in December.
Yeah, the 22nd December.
Okay, all right. So about 18 months.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, interesting.
Which I think like getting close to the 215 setter mark would be great, and then after that, like moving it close to the 230 mark. But that's, records are to be broken, and they don't really stay. The main goal is to, try to be on the World's Strongest Man podium one day.
All right. I love it. Speaking of pressing, what are your other, like when you talk about like dumbbell and axle, how those compare towards your log, compared to your log?
I've done a 190 axle, and I've done a 131 kilo dumbbell.
Ah, wow. Right. That's a big dumbbell. When was that?
That was leading up to Europe's.
Okay, all right. Yeah. I might have to take a look, because I don't think I saw that, but I think that'd be. I think that'd be pretty.
I'll send it to you. I think it was just on my Insta stories. So.
Okay, all right. You didn't make a post. Man, that's I would say that's a couple kilos better than I ever did. And I made a big deal about when I hit 130. So, so I think we've been pretty positive so far on the show. But one thing I like to kind of bring up, and I think this is something that everybody can learn on, especially the viewers, is that certain things kind of grind our gears. Of course, I've mentioned a lot of things that grind my gears about the world of strongman, or just strongman training, or what I see in the gym. But is there anything that grinds your gears in the world of strongman, or in training, or in the gym?
Could you like specify a bit more? I don't really know what you...
like, is there something you see on the internet, or something where you see in training that just like, that's not cool. That doesn't really fly in my book, or that's not the way I would do it. I think last time when we said, let's say, I'll bring up the example with Wes. I think what grinds Wes's gears is those individuals that think they need 12-week preps to compete in every single competition. I think, for instance, if they don't get that 12-week prep, they don't compete in those shows, even if they get invited to big shows. So he's big into going out there and competing often, especially if there's competitions available to you that make sense and all. I think in the past, things that have grinded, there's a lot of things that grinded my gears. But I think what we agreed on last time is just like when people don't really appreciate what it takes to get to the top, like the amount of work. They think you can take a few cookie cutter approaches to get to the top. So those are kind of more big ones. In the past, I've been like, leg extensions kind of grind my gears, right? Just too much torque on the knees. But anything that comes up for you?
Yeah, I would like agree with what you said. Just extend it a bit. Leading up to being invited to Worlds, seeing some of the. I don't want to mention anybody. I'm not trying to mention anybody, but seeing on the internet some of the guys felt like really hurt not being invited and feeling like it was expected to be invited and really like if I say it a bad way, like crying about it, but I don't want to sound harsh or anything like that. Rather than just saying, okay, I didn't get invited this year, I'll try to find a way to get invited next year. They really that's what I don't really like, because there's, I would say, like 50 athletes to choose from to invite to Worlds, and like if you get invited, you should be, and if you don't, then there was something wrong. Maybe you didn't, perform that well, or you weren't seen that much last year, or stuff like that. And I don't think it should be like you shouldn't be expecting something. You should really try to work as much you can to get the invite rather than, sitting back and expecting it.
Absolutely. I think there's a certain level to entitledness that can get under your skin a little bit. So, I totally understand that. Of course, there was probably a couple athletes that of course we wish that competed, but again, in the end of the day, I think the guys that were there all really wanted to be there. But I think it's very interesting. And imagine like if those guys came on and then Tristan Hoth being one of the last invites didn't get through, right? It's just so many things, like the butterfly effect. What would happen?
Yeah.
Who knows? No one knows. But I would say kind of for the most part, I think when it just comes to just the entitlement, I think you have to let go in that entitlement, even at any stage of strongman. If that's going to be, if you're a strong national level competitor, a strong international competitor, I think it's being humble and being able to take criticism.
People can't let their egos get in the way, So.
Yes. So that's
in everything. That's in everything in life. So.
This is, I think that's what it takes to be a great strongman. Now, for the most part, I would say that's probably everything that I had on my list, but I appreciate you coming on. Are you ever going to start a YouTube channel? Is that a future endeavor on your,
I always thought about that. I always was at one point where I already made a video, but whenever I hear myself talking in a video, I can't listen to myself.
It comes in time. Awful. I think the only person that likes to hear himself talk is Colin Bryce, but I would say that I even don't like the sound of my voice. And I've worked at it, and it's something that even one of the reasons why I like to do the podcast is so I can even work on not only my volume and the way my approach, but just have better delivery, ask better questions. But in time, it gets better. I promise you.
Yeah. But that's the same thing with social media. I want to start to grow my social media, but I can't see. It's not natural for me. It's not something that really came natural to me. So it's something that I struggle with. And starting YouTube probably could help it, but it's something that goes against my skin. It's not comfortable.
Absolutely. I can put out videos, but I don't do the frequency that I need to in order to grow. That's what I struggle with. But you look at that other side of the coin but that's like what might take to, for instance, I imagine we might have similar goals in terms of doing strongman full time one day. And that's almost kind of what it takes is to have that big presence, because we do need to connect with individuals. So sometimes I think getting comfortable with the uncomfortable is just all a part of the process. But I always say just try out just different things that work. I'm not saying to go full bore and try to do what Paul Dwyer is doing, but what Paul Dwyer is doing right now, it's keeping him.
It's working.
Sport.
It's working.
Yeah, he sells 10 shirts every time he makes a video, which is remarkable. And now it's funny, he has more followers and probably people know him more than someone like Mitch Hooper, who goes out and wins most of these competitions and podiums the last 15 out of 16 shows. So it's pretty remarkable, just like the power of social media. But the biggest thing, you just have to be authentic to yourself and put out things that you like and hope that other people will like it too. But where can people find you if they want to learn more information about you, Mr. Ondra?
Definitely my Instagram at Ondra Fojtů, and that would probably be it for now.
All right. Well, it's going to be in the description below, so you can follow him. I do appreciate coming on to the show and
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. Of course, it's been great to get to know you. I'm upset that I'm not coming to whatever show next because it breaks our 3-show streak, but I think we'll be competing with each other sooner than we think. But last thing I'm going to say, what's a few words of advice that you want to leave the listeners to end the show?
Be stubborn. That's the number one reason of success. People being stubborn.
Be stubborn with your goals.
Exactly.
All right, love it. Well, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, notification bell, follow Ondra, and till next time, stay strong, everybody.